And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Today, we're mixing it up a little bit as Connor takes charge to talk about some of the topics that have been on his mind lately. Well, I just come along for the ride and have a good time. To start, the U.S. men's national team are narrowly scraping by Jamaica in the Nations League semifinals this week, sparking outrage and questions into the future of the squad, specifically in the coaching and player personnel aspects. We'll discuss that, share our thoughts, both sides of the argument as always. And then word on the street is that our friends across the sea in Saudi Arabia are putting a big stop on their spending into their sports washing, I guess you could call it, essentially dubbing them as the Chinese Super League 2.0. We're going to look back at some of our predictions that we made during when that news broke in the summer last year, and we'll reflect on it a little bit. And finally, some new names have entered MLS by the way of Cabecita Rodriguez at Portland, or are rumored to be joining soon by the likes of Olivier Giroud to LAFC. We'll dive into our reactions on the moves, how that will pan out in MLS, and what we just think overall about how it looks, right? So I'm Andrew. That's Connor over there. Grace is behind me on my right-hand shoulder, and we are talking this week's biggest MLS news pieces.
Dramatic pause.
Nice big pause for you, so you can work that into the edit.
Definitely not just going to delete it out.
How you doing, buddy?
I was doing better before that Red Bull game, and now I know your ego is going to be inflated to the moon, and I'm going to hear 500 Red Bull references this episode.
I mean, listen, am I elite? Yeah. Are my teams elite? Also, yeah. So it's funny because this I expected this week to be an absolute nightmare because of all of the random rosters that are being put out these days. I mean, I'm just looking here at what Inter Miami versus Red Bull was, and it was just you know an absolute nightmare to pick, and it ended up giving me my best fantasy week of all time. So took that to my veins, right?
And it's put Lewis Morgan as the top goal scorer in the league right now.
Listen, if I didn't use Emil Forsberg on my newcomer of the year pick, I would have had Lewis Morgan as comeback player of the year.
Guess who did have that?
Yeah, listen, it's a connection thing, right?
Yeah, if you want to take credit for it, sure, go ahead.
As much as I'd love to sit here and chat all about the New York Red Bulls, I think we should talk about Scarf of the Week and talk about maybe, just maybe, a little bit of the USMNT. But I want to ask you. Actually, no, I want you to ask me because you're in charge of this episode.
What if I don't want to ask you?
Thanks for listening, guys.
All right, good episode. All right, show me your scarf. I guess I'll take a look at it and see what it is.
This feels weird. Like I'm not usually the first one to scarf it up, but I like it. I like the difference. We're talking USMNT, and the Red Bulls just had a massive result. So we've got the one team with the Red Bull logo and the one nation with the USMNT logo. It just doesn't get better than that, does it?
I wish I
Shout
had a
out.
whiteboard right now so I can keep a tally of the amount of Red Bull references we're getting this episode.
It's almost like you have a computer with Microsoft Word where you can just press a button every time.
That's not as fun.
Um, Shout out, baby bro, for picking this one up for me. Good Christmas gift. Well done.
Shout out, Matt. I don't remember. Do you ask me or do
I just jump right into
you
it.
just do it? Yeah, typical. Never asking for my opinion.
Yeah, I don't
What
care.
else does know? All right. This is paying homage to a player that I will be talking about shortly, but I'm bringing out my Atlanta scarf, hopefully bringing some good luck for this upcoming game with half our team out on international duty. So we're gonna need all the luck that we can get, but yeah, not gonna spoil it, but I think it's pretty obvious which player I'm referring to. Let's get us back on topic and let's start with the USMNT because there's going to be plenty to talk about here. And believe it or not, I've come prepared with questions. Andrew
Wow.
hinted at it before. We're talking between the Jamaica and Mexico game. So anything that has happened in the Mexico game will not be covered in this episode. Maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode if there's anything noteworthy to talk about. But just for this episode that you're listening to, just focused on the Jamaica game. So, as Andrew mentioned, US won 3-1 in extra time with a goal coming in the first minute and basically in the last minute of regulation. And then the US getting two more goals in extra time to get the win and move on to the Nations League final, where they will face Mexico, who took down Panama. I'm going to just skip over the whole, what did you think of the game? I'm jumping right into it. Like, I'm not beating around the bush. I want to have this conversation with you right off the bat.
Okay.
The hot topic player in that starting 11 before the game, and not as hot topic after, but still plenty of people talking about him, is Miles Robinson. He was the one, I believe, the one MLS guy in that starting 11. So of course he got a lot of heat when the lineup drops and people say a lot of things. And I'm curious to think what did you think of his performance? I know it may just be looking at the numbers at this point, but what did you think?
I guess the overall impact that I got from the Twitter sphere was like very easy to pick out, like Miles Robinson. And there were some that were picking out other players, and I have a list of them here, but too often did I see Miles Robinson in there. And it felt, and again, I'm not saying this is what it is, but it felt very much like Miles Robinson made one mistake. If he made a mistake, it was like the end of the world. And anybody else who made a mistake, we're just going to gloss over it until somebody brings it back up, right? So very on par for what USMNT Twitter is.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. I mean, I will be considering Miles played for Atlanta for so long. I have a soft spot in my heart for Miles Robinson. He will always be remembered fondly for his time and what he was able to accomplish here. Watching him grow, so I'm a little. I will 100% say that I am way more biased than plenty of other people are on this topic, but I found five different sources that rated Miles Robinson the highest rated defender in that game. Five different sources: SofaScore, FotMob, Goal.com, NBC Sports, and American Soccer News. Five different sources rated Miles Robinson the best defender in that game. But the way you look at stuff on Twitter would make it sound like Miles Robinson just had the worst game of his entire career. He will continuously be under the absolute biggest microscope because any wrong move that he makes will be criticized to the end of time. But anybody else that makes a mistake, completely look over it. There was a play in the game where Chris Richards was super lazy getting back to the ball. He got beat by the attacking Jamaican player who went in one-on-one with the goalkeeper. Like, they didn't end up scoring, but had they, that's it. The game's sealed. The game's probably sealed and done at that point because he was lazy getting back onto the ball. But if that were Miles Robinson in that case, he would have been crucified on Twitter. Forget about it. And it doesn't matter that Miles Robinson won 11 out of 13 aerial duels this last game. When his name is on the team sheet going into the final against Mexico, you already know all the comments are going to be destroying him. Why is Miles Robinson back in the team? Get him out of here. Give me Tim Ream with one leg before we get Miles Robinson. I did not hear much of a peep at all about Joe Scally's performance, which I thought was mediocre at best. But if Miles Robinson put up that performance, we'd never hear the end of it. He would be getting crucified left and right. It's not
So
surprising. It's not surprising. We knew something like this would happen, right? But I just want to say that I think that it's absolutely outrageous that he gets the amount of slack that he does just because he is the only one in the lineup that happens to be playing in MLS right now, even though he is well talented enough to easily play in Europe.
the one thing I will say is Joe Scally, I did see a lot of notes by halftime to say that he has to come out, in conversation. But Joe Scally was I think the Chris Richards example that you brought up probably is a little bit more. I'd be a little bit more upset that it wasn't spoken about as much as the Joe Scally thing, because I think Joe Scally, I think, is one of the players that now hopefully is going to stop getting this. Why is Joe Scally not involved treatment online? Because every time he gets put into a starting 11, every time he gets subbed onto a game, it's just meh, right? It's just underwhelming. It's just like he's either not making enough of an impact to like warrant being an out and out like, oh, no doubter, or he's making enough mistakes where people are calling for his sub by halftime. That consistent, and I'm sure he's playing fine for the mid-table club in the Bundesliga or the Bayern Liga, excuse me. I can't call it that now because they're not going to win it this year.
You just say Bayer.
Yeah, like I said, the Bayern League, yeah, that's better. I'm sure he's playing fine. I think I saw like 25 appearances for the 12th rated team out of 18 in Germany. Like maybe we start having the conversation about like form and what it means in the national team compared to the constant callbacks, right? And I have a little section here. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but it's more about what do we have left? What's the other option, right? Dest suspended for the very interesting red card he got the other last time they went out, but are there better options there than a Joe Scally? Are there better options than a Miles Robinson? Are there better options than a Chris Richards, right? Like I think the problem is less that Miles Robinson is getting hate and more that people are making these assumptions that there are just, free, 453 better options there. And they are going to use, and like we've talked about before, when you have something that you are emotionally attached to, right? Like for the most part, I think we do a pretty good job being not emotionally attached to the things we're talking about so that we can find the true meaning of whatever we're talking about. Maybe with Miles Robinson and your connection to him, that might be a little tougher, right? Or maybe when we talk about Red Bull for me, right? Those sorts of conversations. But like, I think the problem is less about that and more about people having that connection to, I don't want MLS players in my national team. So every time he makes the mistake, I'm going to say there's 500 people better than him when maybe there are, but it's amplified to a point it doesn't need to be, right? I think that's the main issue.
I guess that's pretty fair. I'm going to move on to the next question because I have a few more and I want to keep the discussion rolling.
Okay.
So this is not the first time that we've seen the USMNT struggle to get their attack going. It seems to be a common theme that has happened through different tournaments and for probably a few years now. But my question to you is, and you could say this on a more broad scale, or if you want to just focus on this game in particular, but who's more to blame for the lack of the attack? Is it Gregg and his tactics, or is it the players?
I've got a couple of things here. So I think it's a mix of both, right? So
Cop out answer. I knew I should have said who's more to blame.
and it depends on the day, by the way. When you're a coach, you game plan for everything that can possibly happen, right? You're watching film, you know that they're going to sit in a low block. How are we going to break them apart, right? If you've got a game plan that says, okay, we're going to, play the ball into wide areas, create 1v1s, 2v1 overloads, exploit maybe one of their weaker center backs, anything like that. And your team just tries to force it up the middle every time, going against the way that you've trained them because you realize that is the best area for success and your team doesn't do that. It's on the players, right? You can't blame a coach for players not listening to what they want to do. That being said, if the coach comes out and is encouraging their players to be patient and methodical and not try new things and just be very, very structured and rigid, that's a coaching thing, right? And that is why I don't like that question as much, because it's very difficult to quantify when you're watching that. However, and I'll give you your answer that you're looking for, I do think it's more on Gregg than on the players, right? Gregg has had a history from all the way back in his time in Norway, some
One of the Scandinavian countries.
some Scandinavian country, where he was released because of his inability to create attacking football. Then he goes into MLS. He comes back to MLS, and he is once again failing to create a bunch of attacking options. He didn't win a lot when he was here. Now he goes to the men's national team and he creates a really good environment of we're going to be tough to beat. We're going to be defensively strong. We're going to be, we're going to be on the ball if we can. We are going to exploit these, whatever it may be, right? Whatever, you can tell that the team has this camaraderie about them, that they enjoy being together, enjoy playing together. They hold each other accountable, which is all great. But at the end of the day, when your tactics come in, and it's now been, as you mentioned, years that Gregg has failed to create exciting attacking football against opponents that he should, right? Like, yeah, we scored 6 goals against Belarus, maybe. We scored 4 against Oman, 4 against Uzbekistan. Like, great. You should be. Now we're going up against Jamaica's side that is, first of all, we shouldn't have given up that goal at the beginning, right? But once that happens, now you're asking Jamaica just to sit in and say, break us down, right? I dare you. And that's not going to happen, right? And that is then setting yourself up, right? Because you could have done something where your game plan was, we are going to possess the ball, we're going to draw players out, we're going to utilize the half spaces, and then we're going to play 1v1 wide to Pulisic and Weah and let them go at them all day long, because that's what they're best at, right? The second that goal goes in the 45th second, or whatever it went in, your entire game plan goes out the window, and now it's how do you react to that? And that's where Gregg, I think, has a problem. When Gregg's game plan is A1 perfect and everything goes according to plan, which is very rare in this sport, everything looks great, right? The second he needs to adapt and be a tactical coach in the moment, coaching in the moment is such a underutilized skill in our coaching toolkit. That is where I believe he struggles, where he just kind of believes in it's going to happen eventually, not trying to make these tactical changes. And then I'm sure we'll talk about this too, the player selection was understandable but questionable. So that's where I'm at. I just went down my little coaching tree. So
No, I think that was a really good explanation of it, at least from a coach's perspective. Like that's a perspective that I just can't bring out.
go
And I
get your C license, everybody. That's what it gets you.
it's a good perspective to think on that situational managing, like thinking of that as like a trait to like learn and grow at, as opposed to just like something that people just have or don't have. So
I'll tell you the most difficult part of it is he's a defender trying to coach attacking, which is extremely difficult, right? I'm a goalkeeper. I can coach goalkeepers all day long, twice on Sunday, and make very good goalkeepers. I can coach a team to be tactically sound. I can coach an individual to be like technically sound. Like I can teach a player how to dribble and turn and pass. I can teach a team how to be in shape. Like if I have one mindset and say I am going to make my players play in a 4-4-2, and we are going to have one of my strikers drop into a false 9 when we're defending. We're going to be narrow. I can do all of that. Where my struggle is okay, we've just given up a goal and we haven't scored in 4 games. How am I going to fix this? Right. So, and now you take that back to a defender whose entire job has been to prevent goals. It is a different mindset. So that is, I think, one of the other things. And I don't know quite I don't remember who's on his staff, but I think he'd do really well if he just had an assistant coach who is just an attacking master. Like, I'll, while we talk about the next section, that'll be what I look up here, the assistant coach here. But like, yeah, Gregg, you're the head coach, but even in the NFL, right? NFL has attacking or offense and defensive coordinator, right? People who know that specialty up, down, sideways. That's not a problem to have.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there needs to be much more emphasis on the attack, because that's where our best players are, quite frankly. And you can have some debate about who the best players are, but I think the reality is that the guys like Gio, the guys like Pooley, those are our top players. Like I think we have good talent throughout the entirety of the team, but those are the guys that I think you got to focus on and get the most out of, because if you are getting the most out of this attack, I mean, it would be far and away the best attack in CONCACAF. I think it would be one of the better attacks even in UEFA. it would be one of the better attacks in the world if you got like if you were able to get the best out of these guys. And I think that would do this team like a it would help the team a ton because like clearly we can be as strong as we could try to be as strong defensively as we want to be, but as soon as we come up against the stronger teams, we just don't have. I just don't think we have the talent to compete with them on the defensive end, and that's why you see the games like the Germany game where they just can't get it done there. To limit the goals and let the attack get their one or two that we need to get the win. So that's why I feel like if we focus more on the attack, now you're giving yourself more of an opportunity in an area where you're stronger. Uh, Long-winded way. I'll go with the cop out answer too. So I'm sure there's moments where there's a little bit of both to blame, but I think the larger problem is Gregg. And I know we've talked about it in the past. You covered it a bit more as well, but I just don't think he's the right man for this team. I want to caveat that by saying I think it's harder than it looks to get the team to all click and kind of get on a tactical, like on the tactical same page. But I still think that Gregg's not the right guy to get it done. I just think that he has proven time and time again that he's just not the guy to get the most out of this team because there's still, I think we all know, whether we're MLS supporters or anti-MLS supporters, that there's just more that we can get out of this team than we've seen so far.
You might be the only person who watches soccer who can actively put his hand up and say, yeah, I don't know all the answers, but it looks hard. Like it looks hard and I don't know how to do it, right? For the most part, you've got people, especially our friends on USMNT Twitter, who can look at it and say, it's not hard. This is how you do it. And that's not how you do it, right? It's tough to have a viewpoint that is very understanding of a difficult topic and knowing that there is somebody who can make it better. Sure.
Yeah, it's super easy to just be like, yeah, just throw all of the best players on the field and it'll work. Like, yeah, sure, it's gonna work when you play Trinidad. It's gonna work when you play Honduras. But the minute that you try to take that step further, the minute you go to Copa America with no game plan and just throwing your best players out there, you're gonna get destroyed by Argentina. You're gonna get destroyed by Brazil. You take that to the World Cup stage, you're getting destroyed by many European teams. You got to have the good players on the field plus a tactic that's going to work with all of them together. So I think people just assume you could throw your best players out there and just make it work. Like, oh, I put a formation together that's a typical formation that has all our best players on there, but
yeah,
what are we going to do with that formation?
I ran with a 2-2-5, 2-2-6. It looked great. Like
even if they even if they just say like, oh, we'll put together a 4-2-3-1. It's like, okay, you put the players that you want out there. Now, what are you going to do with it? You can't just be like, okay, 4-2-3-1, have fun. Like, go ahead, go try and beat Messi in Argentina now. Good luck.
And you have now just recognized as a non-coach what we call roles and responsibilities, right? So
which is what I think USMNT Twitter forgets about sometimes.
Yep, and that's why it's like, oh, it's so easy. When Tyler Adams comes back, we're going to sit Yunus Musa. It's like, okay, well, where does Gio Reyna go? He's going to go out wide. Okay, well, where does Haji Wright go? He's going to go up top. Okay, well, where does right? So when you're preparing against a team, whether it be Trinidad and Tobago, whether it be St. Kitts and Nevis, whether it be San Marino, whether it be Argentina, everybody is going to have to. You are going to have to find what the other team does. And again, it'll be different if you are the expected favorite, right? If we're playing San Marino, there's a lot less prep that goes into it versus Argentina, right? But if you're playing Argentina and you need to say, okay, there's this little 5'7" left-footed guy, and every time he's on the ball, good things usually happen. How do we prevent that from happening? Well, playing somebody like Weston McKennie next to Yunus Musa as a double pivot 6 might not be the best option there because they both tend to like to go forward. Where Tyler Adams can go forward, but he likes to sit in and defend, right? For example, right? There are tons of other examples we can pick out of there and what have you, but it's not easy just to wake up and be like, this guy is higher rated on FIFA. He needs to be playing. Like it's there's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah, I mean, even to the point of like, okay, we've decided we're gonna put Balogun up top. Jamaica scores their goal, they're going to sit in for the rest of the game. How do we want to utilize Balogun up top? Like if they're going to sit in, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense to try to play on the back of the line and try to get it behind. Maybe he has to play more like a deep lying playmaker, get involved in the game more. How far, like how deep do we want him to drop? If he drops too deep, like who's going to be able to fill the striker hole? Like I think there's just so many more questions to it than people actually give it credit for.
And welcome to the fun world of coaching. You get your grassroots license for that. Well done.
So my last question for you, if Gregg were sacked today, do you think the problems get fixed? Regardless of who comes in next.
Yeah.
If Gregg is sacked today and we just bring in somebody else, are the problems fixed?
Sorry.
Oh man, that would be a fun topic. I'm gonna say it because now we have the opportunity to, because you mentioned him. I think Jesse Marsch and his team selections would piss off the USMNT crowd even more than Gregg Berhalter. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think this dude is MLS coded. Like fully MLS coded.
Did you just find the exact reason why I want him in the men's national team, just for my pure joy?
Just to piss people off?
so it depends on who comes in, right? Like I think a top tier coach takes these play, and we've had this conversation before. People can go look up some of our other USMNT episodes, but and again, I hate giving you credit, but I'll do it if I have to. You made a really good point about the level of experience Gregg has versus the level of experience that these players have, right? Gregg is a MLS once tried in Europe and failed coach who's been promoted to the national team, which was great in 2010 when most of our players were here. We've got players who are the best player on one of the best teams in one of the best leagues in the country, in Christian Pulisic, in Weston McKennie playing well in Juve. There are disconnects there between what you can teach them or what they are able to know from other coaches at very high levels comparative to what he is able to. I said, I cannot walk into the men's national team tomorrow and fix their problems, even with my licensing and experience in the game, whatever. I can't, right? I can't even walk into a USL2 side and make them successful. I probably would struggle to walk into Alfred's side if I wanted to and coach this team into success. I'd be a little bit more adept at it because I've been in the program for 3 years, right? Well, as a coach and then 4 years as a player. So I know exactly what we're doing. But there is a level where you need to like as a coach, as a manager, need to understand, like, I don't know if I can get this guy better. Like, it's really good that Messi is already damn near perfect, because how does a manager go in and be like, I'm going to get the best out of you, Lionel Messi? It's like, you don't. You get the best out of Lionel Messi. Get the best out of Cristiano Ronaldo. Have fun.
Yeah, leave him alone.
Do not listen to a word. Leo, you're gonna track back. You're gonna make up a back five when we're in.
Yeah, I need you to press, Leo. 90 minutes of pressing,
and then he's gonna turn around and be like, "No,
absolutely not."
And then he's gonna go score 4 goals, right? Like there are levels to the ability, and I'm not saying that we have anybody in the men's national team at the level of one of those guys, but there are tiers, right? So if there is a person, and I'll throw out some names, right? Jose Mourinho, for example. I don't know if he's been picked up yet. Any of the guys who, have managed maybe in the European leagues for a little bit longer, who fit the style of those players that have been training in that environment for the last 4, 5, 6 years, they probably can fix this issue. If we're calling Jesse Marsch, who is a gegenpress, win the ball at all costs in high areas and turn it over, if we're calling Wilfred Nancy, who might be a stretch, right? If we're calling Pat Noonan, Cincinnati, if we're calling Bradley Cornell, right? People who were successful in MLS might not necessarily get the best out of this group. People who were mid in Europe might not get the best out of this group. The elites from Europe always will find a way to get the best out of this group. So it'll depend. Long-winded answer to say it depends on who you bring in.
I want to make this point because I think it'll give hopefully some credit to what you were saying.
Mhm.
I think the best, and maybe this is just dated at this point and I'm misremembering, but I think Gregg's best performance so far in his tenure as coach was 2021 Gold Cup.
Yeah.
And you know what that roster consisted of in 2021 Gold Cup?
Yep.
Basically a full MLS roster. So I think it's exactly to your point. I mean, he's an MLS coach. It's where he was. It was I don't want to say his bread and butter because that makes it sound like he did really well there, but it's what he knows.
um,
So when he brings in players who are playing there and know a similar system, like I think that's when he'll get more out of those players. Not to say that the team itself will be better because he's bringing in MLS players who know how to do his system more, but I just think he'll be able to get more out of those players than he'll be able to get out of the European players.
well,
So,
and again, remember, you're not giving validity to my point. You're giving validity to your own point. This is your concept, right? Take ownership. Be proud.
okay. I am smart. I have much ball knowledge.
Let's jump back and talk about players who maybe we need to think about maybe making a swap for.
Reevaluate.
Yeah.
Sure.
Um, I've got three of them, but we've already talked about one of them. So I spoke a little bit about the Joe Scally, right? Kind of tired that we're hearing these things, right? There's always going to be these games that end up with USMNT Twitter screaming about, how we're never going to beat Brazil with a performance like that, right? Um, Joe Scally seems to be one of those people who kind of got thrown into the sacrificial lamb thing, but to me, this isn't a, you know, who's going to play instead of Joe Scally because Serginho Dest exists, right? But it's quite clear that when Joe Scally gets called upon, he hasn't quite done it. So then who's the next guy up? And I look at a guy like Brooks Lennon. Brooks Lennon is sitting at home right now, getting 950 assists a minute with Atlanta United, while Joe Scally is probably, like we said, doing all right for a mid-table Bundesliga team. When he doesn't get the job done, who's next, right? We've got Yedlin, who we kind of have hopefully phased out at this point. I think he's a little bit past his time. Moore and Brooks Lennon, like who is right back too? And again, this is one of those things where and we're going to talk about it with another player here, that the conversation between the starter is a non-starter, right? Serginho Dest is your starting right. But when Dest does something stupid and gets a red card, when Dest gets tired and needs to be rested or rotated, right? Who's the next guy up? I don't think Joe Scally has done enough to earn that, and just existing in Europe hasn't given him that next level ability. Now, I'll also preface that saying he's hella young, right? So much time to grow. But do we want to use that time to grow in the national team where he might be making mistakes that cost us trophies? Do we want to try it out with somebody maybe who's not proven? I don't know the answer to that, but I do think it's worth a conversation.
Yeah. I feel like every time I think of Joe Scally USMNT performances, I think underwhelming. And maybe that's just like a product of people hyping him up so much online because he plays for Borussia Mönchengladbach and people just absolutely lose their minds over that.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think maybe some time away from the team would be good for him. I mean, maybe you give him the Mark McKenzie, like a couple of bad performances, take some time away from the team, and then come back at a later point. Like he's so young, like you said, he can come back in a few years and still be considered young and still have plenty of time to work his way into this team. I'm not saying you got to rule this guy out for World Cup 2026. Like I'm just saying maybe like a couple of windows away might help him. He could just focus on club, not have to, keep jumping back and forth, and maybe
Well,
that'll help him. He gets a bit more experience and then he comes in more prepared.
that's exactly what I was suggesting. I feel like I didn't actually mention it, but I'm not saying kick him to the curb. I'm saying drop him to the B squad. Let him play in Gold Cup. Let him play in
How old is he? He should have
22,
been with like he's what?
22, I think.
Is he eligible for the Olympics? You should have sent him to the
Yeah,
Olympics.
U23. But again, it's who do you want to take and put in? And again, player personnel is difficult. I'm not trying to uh, dump on anybody for their choice in selections here. Yeah, he's 21, right? So he's got tons of room to grow. I think it might be better to put him in a Gold Cup team or a level of a Gold Cup team where he absolutely dominates it and has a bit of confidence going into the next level than maybe in the men's national team. So, or like in the first team with all these players, right?
It's not a bad idea. I mean, I think the right back spot, to your point, it's not our most secure position at the moment behind Dest. I think it was Reggie Cannon's spot for a long time, and I don't necessarily think he's completely out of the mix.
What
He,
happened to him?
he's with QPR now.
Goodness me.
I definitely think his stock has been hurt. I don't think he's the number 2 guy anymore. I think maybe he can get back to that point again, but a name that I'm gonna throw out there is Brian Reynolds, who has been playing consistently for a Westerlo side in
Westerlo
Belgium.
in Belgium, yeah.
Yeah. He's getting consistent game time. You know, it was a team that finished 7th in the Belgian league last year, which for the level, like for the quality of team, I think they probably did pretty well for themselves. I don't particularly think of that side as one of the top Belgian sides. So I imagine he's probably playing pretty well. And he's a starter again this year. So I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him kind of in the mix again. I'm not a huge fan of Shaq Moore or DeAndre Yedlin here. I don't think Yedlin's and I mean, I don't love the Yedlin picks when he's in here, but I also would prefer him over like Shaq Moore. I think he's got
Sure.
good experience, and I think his performances have been solid enough that if we really needed to call on him, like I wouldn't feel concerned. Whereas sometimes when Shaq Moore has been in, I've been pretty concerned. But yeah, it's a bit of a dodgy spot right now behind Dest. So we need Dest to stop getting these stupid red cards.
Yeah, for real. And again, right, that's the idea is how do you want to build that spot up? Are we going to rely on the club team to get them to a spot where they can just step in and do the job, right? I don't know. I have another person here, and his name is Tim Weah. So there is a lot of discourse on the Twitters about whether Tim Weah is an absolute baller or the worst player to ever put on a U.S. men's national team kit. And it is USMNT fan 23852 versus USMNT stan 94279. And they're just going at each other about whether one is really good or one is really bad. And like I said, my popcorn emptying very quickly watching this discourse. So one and it really stems from statistics versus the eye test, right? Somebody's saying like his stats are so bad they don't deserve to be anywhere near a national team pool, and he needs to be replaced ASAP, right? And the other is if you watch what he does on the ball when he's given the correct opportunity, right? When the system works to create the space that he needs to go forward, then he's very, very good. Just because he's not getting goals and assists doesn't mean he's not creating chances, right? The one thing that I really like that comes out this is like somebody's like, he needs to be replaced now. Get him out. I don't want to ever see him again. And then nobody ever says like, hey, we should replace him with, right? Like nobody ever gives that answer.
Doesn't matter. You could go in there. Just get him out.
Listen, all I'm saying is if you really need a replacement, my buddy Alex Mawila is sitting right in the corner and he's ready to go. Like you just say the word. Yeah,
you could go anywhere. He can be Cam.
Right,
he can be right wing, left wing. Put him in goal.
Right, you're damn right. I got an Alex Mawila reference in a USMNT episode. Yeah, I did. But listen, I've watched Weah play. I didn't watch him last night, but again, I don't think that would have shown us the best of what he could do, right? Because of the low block and things like that. But his explosiveness and chance creation is the best that we have in this pool, like bar none. Did he have a tough game? I mean, everybody had a tough game, right? But seeing him underperform in one game and then having a tough club situation, which we'll talk about here in a second, two different things, right? But like I said, seeing him underperform in a game and just saying he has to go without actually giving a replacement is like massive Twitter energy, right? Like I'm angry. I need to express my feelings and I have no idea how to fix it, but I'm mad and I want people to know about it. Like that doesn't fix anything. And also you need to go a little bit deeper, I think, right? I think it was over the course of the last 1,000 minutes he's played with the U.S. men's national team, he's got 9 goal contributions. And then when you look at his club form, he plays as a right back, a wing back, and plays 900 minutes for Juve in a season, and he's got one assist in 900 minutes or something like that. So how does that translate into what he can do as a winger? Should he be getting chances at maybe right back over Scally? If we just talk about maybe needing a backup right back, should other wingers maybe be given a chance? Right, Brendan Aronson, Julian Gressel is a name that comes to mind because I just watched him play today. I don't know these answers, but I think again it's an interesting conversation to have because at the end of the day, you need to bring to the World Cup, to the Copa America, wherever it is, you need to bring the best of the best 23, 26, however many you're going to bring, you need to bring the best of the best. So you need to figure out who they are, and these chances are slim. So I'm not saying that, Gressel's the answer, but it's worth a shot, right? I'm trying to think. There are other players. What's the guy who's playing in? I think he's
Where?
playing in Belgium too.
A winger?
Yeah. Oh, Taylor Booth. He's playing in
Oh, he's in
in
Netherlands.
Netherlands. Yeah. Um, Maybe he gets a shot, right? And again, I don't know at what level of this national team, but at some point we need to find the depth because as it was very clear, when one person doesn't have it, and you need to find whoever the next person is. And again, when we talk about roles and responsibilities, right? Weah, 1v1, great technical ability, very good at creating chances in open play. Brendan Aronson, his usual replacement, phenomenal pressing ability, great engine, doesn't stop running for the life of him, and wins the ball in high areas, but you get him into a one-on-one, and that's not his strength. So again, it's who are we going up against? What is the game plan, and how do we want to go about this? So, interesting conversations between club form to national team form, and then the overlying answer is who's next, and is it even worth it to have that person come up, right?
I personally love Weah in the national team. I think he's one of the few guys where when we're having poor games, he just pulls something out of nothing because he is that explosive player like you talked about. He might be just kind of you might forget he's on the field for like 30 minutes, but all it takes is like 5 minutes for him and he just whips in like the most he beats his defender with some ridiculous pace, whips in a ridiculous ball, and all of a sudden we have a goal. It's like he's so good at just turning around stuff when things look really poor. And I personally would like to continue seeing him in the game. I mean, he should have had an assist. He had a really good ball into the box that Tillman kind of like scuffed a little bit. I think it was just like a weird bounce, but he could have easily gotten an assist on that. Yeah, I just think he continuously produces when he's in there. I don't really get the point of kind of calling for his head just because he didn't get a goal contribution in that last game against Jamaica. I personally would like to see him continue to play because I like Pooley on the left side better anyway. So I'd prefer to see Pooley out there and Weah on the right. I'm not a huge fan of Weah going into the right back spot. In a five in the back, if he's a wing back, I'd be game for it. But in a four in the back, I don't know if I trust him enough defensively to get the job
Fair,
done there. Unless we're playing like a much weaker team, in which case
sure.
I'm all for it then.
Yeah,
But
but it was clear that he's not in those plans. I think Weston McKennie went out at right back in that game. So, um, and Weah was still on the field. So, uh, don't think that'll ever be the plan. But that also makes sense, right? He's an attacker. He can defend, but he's an attacker.
yeah. I'll give my I think you have one more player you said that
Yep.
I'm gonna jump in here and give you mine. I think Malik Tillman's been a bit disappointing. What?
There is a dancing group of people on the field now at halftime. So
On
this
the
group,
field.
this
They
group
were
was
practicing.
practicing in the corner for their
The
for their
halftime show.
halftime performance. I have found the answer. Let's go.
All right. I'm gonna jump in here with my player and then we'll go to your last one. And maybe we have the same player, I'm not too sure, but um Malik Tillman for me. I know he got the start in the game against Jamaica. I don't think he was anything special in that game. I think he's had a really, really good season with PSV. That America trio over there in PSV has been awesome to follow this whole season. And I think it was worth giving him the start, but he's another guy that I just feel like hasn't produced on the international stage for us. Like a Joe Scally type of thing. Like, okay, he might be like at a big club, like doing pretty well at the big club, but once he gets to the USMNT, it's just like not clicking. And transfer market, I don't know how many games they have listed on here. So bear with me. I'm just going off of what I'm seeing in front of me. He's had 8 appearances, I believe, for the USMNT so far, and no goals and assists. So I think he should still be in and around the team. I just don't think he's a guy that we put out as a starter. I think he's a good guy to have on the bench and bring in into certain situations, but I think when healthy, I like Adams, McKennie, Musa, and maybe even Johnny ahead of him in the midfield. So that's my player that I'm going to throw out there from the Jamaica game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very clear that unless you are so maybe not clear. Clear is not the right word, but the non-top five league players, if they are not the single best player in that league, they tend to have difficulty getting up to the pace. I think if that makes sense, right? Um, you saw it with Tillman. You saw it with there's one
Mark
other guy,
McKenzie.
Mark McKenzie. Yeah, thank you. And that's not an overarching thing, right? Des plays at Ajax, and he's not the best player in the Eredivisie, but he's good. Pepe playing at PSV, and he has his moments, right? Um, the the Tillman shout, I think he was always brought in to be a number two, number three guy, right? But because Reyna hasn't played a ton, Adams is still on minutes restrictions, that they were kind of forced to shoehorn him in there. Now, again, I think they were looking for more of an attacking presence, right? We talk about roles and responsibilities. So you could have started Johnny, who I think is a better fit in the midfield than um, Tillman. But then you're relying on Musa, McKennie, Johnny. Now, who's going to go forward? Who's going to stay back? Who's going to balance that triangle? We don't know. And I don't know if it's a personnel thing and how they wanted to play. That'd be my guess because Tillman does have a little bit more going forward. He does like to go forward a little bit better. That's kind of the way I see that. So agree with you there. My final one, it's going to lead into our last conversation here. Florian Balogun once again has failed to create much of anything going forward. And again, how much of that has to do with the chance creators behind him and next to him and the low block? Probably a ton of it, right? But for all the shtick that Jesus Ferreira gets for only scoring against island teams, he played a full group against TNT, both legs, didn't score. Now goes against Jamaica, didn't score. He's got 3 goals in 8 appearances for the men's national team against Canada, Ghana, and Oman. The Ghana game, I think, is impressive. I think it might have been a pen. I might be wrong there. Canada was kind of his first game in and was a big Nations League thing. And then Oman, right? I'm not saying he's cooked and get rid of him and we're done. But as we head into these tournaments that are relatively important, right? The Copa America, the World Cup, these things that matter, we need to find the person who's going to convert these chances. Like I mentioned, when you go to these, you're going to be looking for the person who is going to score the goals in a 6. You got 6 games to score. Who's going to be the person to score 3 goals in those 6 games, right? That's the person we need to find. Now, again, I'm not saying Balogun's out, but we've got other options, right? There are people who aren't in the team. There are people who are in the team on the bench. There are people who are heating up and might be really hot by the time we get to a Copa America or a World Cup, and we need to take those into consideration as well. But the point is, like, even Florian Balogun in, I believe, is at Monaco now.
Yeah.
Florian Balogun at Monaco, and as I mentioned, 22 years old. He's got a 30 million price tag. All great. 5 goals, 4 assists in Monaco in 21 appearances, but he's got where's Monaco right now in League One?
They're third.
Third. So he's got 5 goals in a really they're second in a 19 or a 17 team league, right? Nobody's catching PSG because of course they're not. There are other options that if he is not performing, whether and I'm not saying kick him out, but if we're looking at somebody who's going to start and make these impacts, if he's not scoring, we can't go 60, 70 minutes without him getting chances or scoring goals. We need somebody who's going to do that. So if that means that somebody's going to sit in a low block and we need to start serving balls into the box, we need somebody who's going to go up and win the ball. Haji Wright, Brandon Vasquez, players of that nature, right? People are going to go up and win the ball with their head, which maybe, and I haven't watched enough of Balogun to know if that's his style or not, but quite clearly it didn't work last time or the time before that, right? So again, I'm just putting out in conversation that it's worth having the thought of somebody else just to see what might happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna err on the side of kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt because I feel like it's been so many years since we've seen a striker in the USMNT consistently be a good goal scorer for us.
Yep.
There's guys that pop up and get hot at certain times, like Haji scoring the brace last game, and Pepe's had his moments where he gets hot. Sargent has his moments as well, but nobody's just been able to be consistent about it and like completely lock down that striker spot. So I'm just gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and just chalk it up to the fact that it's just a system that really hasn't benefited strikers. Because I do think the quality is 100% there. I think he's a really good striker and just needs to be in the right situation. And I know we have the players on this team to put him in the right situations. I just don't think the tactic has been good for his game so far, I guess is the way I'll phrase that.
Yeah, that's probably fair too. But again, if that is the tactic we are going to stick with, whether it right, wrong, or indifferent, we need to find the player that fits the tactic then, right? If it's clear that he's not that player, then first of all, probably bad on Gregg, right? For not being able to, again, coach in the moment and recognize what fits his system and who fits that system or change his system to fit the players that he has. But if that is going to be the way it goes, we need to find the players that fit the system.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think to your exact point, I think I agree as well. If he's going 45, 50, 60 at most minutes and not really getting involved in the game at all, then I think it's worth making the change. I don't think he should just have the full 90-minute leash just because he's playing for Monaco.
Sure. So that whole conversation then leads into one of my bigger questions, and that's as we get into the final here, which is going to be played tomorrow on the date of recording, yesterday on the date of release of the episode, and who are we starting in the final? And that's why I used Balogun last as my last player because, again, he's been underwhelming kind of at best, right? So does Haji Wright start up top? Does Pepe start up top with Reyna and Aronson and you got all these different options. What do we do in the finals? I kind of want to ask. I guess I'll send that to you.
I think I go pretty similar to what we did against Jamaica. A couple of changes I'd make. I'd take Tillman out. I'd go Reyna starting and make it a 4-2-3-1. So I'd stick with Balogun up top, give him at least the first half. Then you can make adjustments, kind of feel it out. Pooley, Gio, Weah as the attacking three. Musa, McKennie behind it. Dest at right back. I stick with Robinson and Richards, and then Anthony Robinson at left back, and Turner stays in goal. That's how I'd line it up.
For me, I think you stay with the hot hand, right? Tillman and Balogun go to the bench, like you mentioned. Well, for Tillman at least. And Wright and Reyna go into the 11 against the start, right? Now, I would also consider an Aronson for Weah swap if you want to press them early, right? Because like we mentioned with roles and responsibilities, if you're looking to win the ball high and put them under pressure, Aronson's probably your guy for them. Now, maybe Pepe goes up top and Haji Wright goes out wide with Aronson still off the bench, right? You got tons of options here. So it all depends on, again, how you want to play the game. But I do think you stick with what worked last time. So the hot hands, right? So I think Haji Wright has to start. I think him and Reyna together had a really good chemistry going on. Other than that, again, it's all up to what you want your team to look like as the whistle blows to open the game.
I personally like Aronson and Haji off the bench more, going against tired legs. I think Aronson's press will be more effective if guys are a little bit sloppier with the ball. Haji, I'm kind of indifferent on. I don't see it. I know a lot of people are saying they want him on the wing instead. They want him on the left wing because I think that's where he plays for Coventry.
Coventry.
And they want to see Pooley out on the right, which I'm fine with getting to that point at some point in the game, but I don't know if I like it to start the game. I again like I think Weah is a really good player for us. I think he can be a game changer when he gets his opportunity, and there may not be a ton of opportunities against Mexico. Like
Right.
at the end of the day, like it's still, even though we like to joke about their organization and there might be some actual like realism to them like kind of taking steps backwards, but they're still a good team. They're still going to put up a good fight against us. There may not be a ton of chances, and if Weah's the guy to get us those couple of chances, then I'd rather stick with him than Aronson, who's not going to necessarily create chances, but just kind of put some pressure on them, which I think they'll be more adept to getting out of at the earlier parts of the game.
Yeah. And, again, it'll be how are we going to coach in the moment? How are we going to be able to be flexible with whatever we see? And just be able to figure it out on the fly, right? We haven't asked the big question, have we?
What is the big question?
How much longer does Berhalter have before he's sacked? Or are you Berhalter out? I know we talked a little bit about what the problems were, but what's the answer?
I mean, I'd personally like him to be out. I'd prefer a European style coach. I know we talked about this already. I think it suits the players better. I don't think he gets sacked anytime. I mean, I think Copa America is his first chance to maybe get sacked, but it would have to be a stinker. Like we'd have to go like completely winless, just look absolutely lost out there, and I think he gets canned for that. I think if they put up even like remotely a decent performance, I think he's in the driver's seat for 2026, which sucks to say because I do not want him in charge for 2026. I think that is just way too good of an opportunity to pass on having Gregg Berhalter be our guy in charge for that push in the World Cup. But it's going to be hard to get him out. Like they clearly have a lot of faith in him, and maybe in some part that's because of what a couple of the players say about him. But I don't think it's going to be so easy to get him out of the head coaching role.
You know me, I don't jump to conclusions very quickly. I'm more of a wait it out, let's see how it goes type of thing. Um, God damn it, did you captain Acosta? No, you didn't. You captain Suarez. Acosta's got a yellow.
There
That
you go.
sucks. So you know me, I'm not really fast to jump to conclusions. I like to watch things play out, see how it goes, and especially when we win, right? Like this is a lot of like, oh my god, this is the worst thing ever, and we're going to a final of a Nations League, right, for the third time in 3 tries. But there are some red flags, and we've talked about them a little bit, right? The lack of killer instinct in games that matter. We don't score goals at a level with the talent that we have should be scoring, right? Regardless of how the team lines up. That's a problem, right? When you have the group like we do, where the striker pool is strong, relatively deep comparative to what we've been. Wingers are creating chances from the biggest clubs out there. Our chance creators in general are just relatively talented versus what we're used to having. The lack of productivity is very worrying to me. That is, and what's most worrying is the fact that there are blueprints out there on how to make things difficult for us. There are blueprints out there to say, all you got to do is sit in, wait for one mistake to happen, and then go. One mistake to happen, and then go. And that's worrying because that's not a difficult thing to do, especially when you're a team that's used to doing stuff like that. He also doesn't have a great track record against teams that are relatively decent, which means that when we get into things like the Copa America, where we're going to play Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, I've got worries that we'll underperform in those areas. So, I'm not ready to kick him out yet, but as you were mentioning, you have some like criteria. So for me, we need to win the Nations League. We need to win tomorrow, right? That is, if not, he's got his Copa America ceiling gets higher, right? You know what I mean? So right now, if he wins the Nations League, which I believe that he should, it needs to be a semifinal appearance in the Copa America. If we lose the Nations League, we need to win Copa America for him to be around. right? That is my bar for him. If he loses tomorrow against Mexico and can't get past the knockout or the group stage, first round of knockouts, whatever it may be in the Copa America, it's time to look in other directions, I think. So that's kind of where my bar is set.
Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna do it, I'd rather them do it quickly. Like, if he fails at Copa America, get him out. Like, give the new coach time to feel things out, figure out which players he likes, and not do this like a month before the World Cup starts in 26.
Yeah, you can't wait on stuff like this. You need somebody to come in and set ideas and go, right?
Yep.
So our last thing here before we wrap it up for the day. After the game, Triple G gets up to the mic and starts subtweeting the hell out of Jesse Marsch in real time.
Oh, I think I heard about this a little bit. Yeah.
So he goes up and the first thing he says is, I don't know if it's the first thing, but it's the only thing I really saw from the thing. He goes to the reporter, he goes, does anybody remember somebody somewhere out there saying that Gio Reyna shouldn't have been called in? Like, I remember somebody said something like that, and it was Jesse Marsch who came out and said something like that. Banter aside and all this stuff, what are your thoughts on something like that?
Ooh, I think I honestly kind of like it because I think it's, if anything, I feel like it'll push both of them to work harder to, you know, oh, I have a rivalry with this guy. He wants my job. It's gonna make me work harder. I want to work harder now. Like, I got to prove this guy wrong. I got to continue to get results. I like it, and plus it's fun. It's just fun to listen to. I like, if Jesse's wrong, then to me that is hopefully showing that Gregg is adapting, getting better, pushing things in the right direction. Like, Jesse being proved wrong here with the Gio thing, I think is great. I think it's good for Gregg, good for Gio. If Jesse's right, then maybe it shines a light on some of the issues that Gregg has. Whereas maybe people like in the punditry area aren't necessarily calling those things out. This happens to just be the wrong thing to call out in this case, but not opposed to more pundits calling certain things out. But let's just call out the right things, not saying that they shouldn't bring Gio onto the national team.
So for me, I think it's got positives and negatives, right? As everything does. Overall, I actually think that this isn't really as much of a big deal as people are like blowing it up to be, whether it be like, oh my God, Jesse haters being like, oh, Jesse got owned, or Gregg, people like, oh my God, Gregg doesn't look professional at all, and it's a bad look on our there's a middle ground here, right? Coaching a coach, so in the positive aspect, right? You've got a coach sticking up for his player who is getting publicly shamed by the media, and this same player who he had a public riff with during one of the biggest tournaments in world football, coming out to his defense, protecting him, backing his performance. I think that's great. And it will give maybe even Gio Reyna a bump in motivation, right? I think that is a very real potential to happen. That being said, there are people out there coming out and being like, "Oh, this is unprofessional," and he's making comments like that, stirring things up, and that's not that's not the look we want out of a head coach of the men's national team. Which to that I call BS, right? This is sports, entertainment. People allow personalities to shine through, and Gregg's biggest personality is his shoes and his back behind the back passes, right? Bounce passes. So for him to come into this press conference, if you will, and use and defend a player with a little bit of like a jab, I think is fine. I think it's great. And remember that there are people out there, one who played in our league, our wonderful MLS, named Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who have made an entire living off of being edgy in press conferences, right? Like when he does it, it's like, oh my God, this is awesome. When Gregg Berhalter does it, it's like, oh, I don't know about that. And yeah, I get it. There are different levels of coach and player and whatever. But end of the day, I don't really see an issue here. I just think it's kind of funny that it became a bigger issue than I think it should have been.
I would agree. I think people definitely are blowing it up more than it needs to be. If you're blowing it up because it's fun, I'm all for it. If you're blowing it up because you're taking this as like a serious hit against the federation, then you need to calm down.
For sure. All right. Well, that is our USMNT recap, precap. I guess when it comes out, it's always going to be a recap, right? So,
Yeah.
Connor, take us away, man. You led it. It's all your
I can't do
episode.
the outro. I don't
You
know how
can
to
do the
do the
outro. I
outro.
believe in you. Give it a shot.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Um, I think we had mentioned at the start of the episode there were a few more topics that we wanted to talk about. We are going to move those into a separate episode because we ended up taking so much time on this USMNT talk. So we will still cover all of those things and maybe even more in the next episode of Designated Players podcast. So if you're interested in any of those topics, make sure to listen to the next episode. If you like any of our content, we do history, we do games, we do current MLS news. We cover it all. USMNT just like this episode. So if you like any of that stuff, make sure to give us a follow. We are on, let's see if I can get this right, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
There you go.
And I think any Spotify platform. Yeah, not Spotify. See, this is why I don't do the outro. Any podcasting platform, Spotify, Apple, you can find us. Give us a listen. Um, Anything else to add?
No, I think you knocked it out of the park.
Wow, a baseball reference to end things off. All right, well, thanks everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of the Designated Players. See ya.